Let's say you represent the seller and all of a sudden you have an unrepresented buyer. What's next? Can you work with the buyer as a unrepresented customer?
Well, yeah, see, that's kind of one of the things that we want to talk about today. And that's a big challenge that we see in the real estate industry is that, especially here in Georgia, we see where a lot of times agents are representing customers, but treating them like clients. And we need to talk about what the difference is between a client versus a customer. So my name's
Absolutely.
Alan Richard. I'm the managing broker here at Maximum Realtor Partners.
My name is Ming Richardson, the compliance broker for Maximum One Realty and Realtor Partners.
So see, like we can, when we represent a customer, we have to make sure that we are performing only ministerial acts, right? And so like when you represent someone as a customer, first of all, you need to make sure that you are filling out an agreement to work with the buyer as a customer. Now, the reason that this is says that agreement to work with a buyer is because your client, your seller is always the client,
Absolutely.
right? And so like even if you're representing your mama as a buyer and you're representing the seller is still a client. Your mama is the customer in there, kind
Because
of
the
thing,
seller came first before your
right?
buyer.
So like when you're working with that customer, one thing that we see is that a lot of times agents don't really understand what is a ministerial act, right? I mean, like what classifies as a ministerial act, and so there's it depends on who you're asking for that definition, right? Because we have the definition that comes from Grec, and we also have the definition that comes from BRETTA. BRETTA defines ministerial acts as those acts that don't require any agent skills or professional judgment. Now, according to Greg, it's those acts that are related to real estate activities which do not require discretion or exercise of the licensee's own judgment. So basically, anything that requires your advice, your experience, that requires your license status to be able to answer it, right? And that's where it starts to get a little bit,
Sticky.
well, only because we want, like we want to be helpful. We want to provide value and we want to have good customer service, even when we are working with someone as a customer. And so like we realize that we can represent one party in a transaction as a client. And as long as your broker agrees, you can represent another party in the transaction as a customer. But too often we're not representing them or we're trying to represent both the exact same way.
And you can't, not technically. So, once again, your seller is always your client and your buyer is always your customer. So, what is a ministerial ad? So, once again, like Alan said, it is one that does not require your professional judgment or discretion.
Mm-hmm.
So, whereas, according to Bretta, define ministerial as presented below. It is important to know the definition used is such as providing, identify, and locating. These verbs do
Yep.
not involve an expert knowledge or providing counseling or consulting.
So we can identify property for sale, for lease, for exchange, that kind
Correct.
of stuff. We can provide real estate statistics and information about property, just general information out there. We can provide pre-printed forms,
Correct.
and we can even act as a scribe, but we can't tell them what to put
We
in.
can't give our personal judgment on, oh, what about that item of repairs? Because that is not, as a customer, that is not our wheelhouse at representing in them in that capacity.
Right. The other thing is we have to be fair and honest when
Correct.
representing a customer. Um,
So if they ask you a direct question and you know the answer, you have to give them a truthful answer.
right. But we have to be careful that we're not stepping outside the bounds. And that's the one that I see a lot of times kind of happen, right? Because anything that requires your discretion, your judgment,
Hmm.
your opinion, your counsel,
Hmm.
or is the benefit of your knowledge, you got to zip it because that's not you're not representing a client, you're representing a customer. And so the challenge is that a lot of times we get asked to answer questions, or sometimes we offer out advice that we should not be offering. And understand that I get it. For me, this is a very challenging topic to kind of take on, because I want to help everybody. I want to give good, sound advice. So if you're representing someone as a customer, as opposed to a client, and they say, "Do you think this is a good deal? Would you buy it? What do you think I should do here? Should I get a home inspection? You know, I need will you do me a comparative market analysis on this property? What do you think I should ask for? What repairs do you think I should request to get done?" Like there's so
These are
many.
questions normally a client will ask you. So you need to be careful how you answer those, because those are client capacity questions, because it does require to have your professional expert opinion on it. So therefore, sometimes you just have to throw it back to the customer and say, would
you
you
know,
want to do that?
in my current capacity representing you as a customer, it is, I can't really answer that right now. And see, that's where it gets really, really tough. Generally
Hmm.
speaking, Ming and I, we don't like representing a buyer and a seller in the same transaction. And there's been a lot of instances where we will actually say, you know what, I'm going to represent the seller, you represent the buyer. We will normally refer it out either to each other or to somebody else. I'm not saying that it's not legal or allowed. I don't mean that. I mean from um, am I doing the best I can do? I have a very hard time in the real estate space knowing an answer to something, but feeling like I can't give it.
Well, it's like I say, if it requires a professional opinion, you cannot do that with a customer. So for a client basis, yes, you can
But
all day.
and there's, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of customers that don't want your advice, your opinion. They're like they know what's being done. You're just
Your
basically
investors typically.
I mean, in a lot of those instances, we see things like that. But sometimes you have very experienced folks that just don't want to go through the hassle of working with somebody else. Um, but generally speaking, this is where, to me, it ends up getting into a little bit of a challenging personal conundrum. The reason that we feel that this is such a timely topic to talk about is because, at one of the I guess byproducts of the most recent NAR lawsuit settlement states that buyers must have a signed buyer brokerage agreement. Agents must have a signed buyer brokerage agreement or some kind of
Or
signed
a
agreement
customer.
prior to showing any property. And so, as a listing agent, do you have to have that? No, because you're representing the seller. You can open the door, you can hold an open house,
You can do
you can
whatever.
do all those kind of things. And so, we are seeing where a lot of listing agents are getting opportunities to possibly be able to double into deal, to represent the seller as a client and represent the buyer as a customer. But therein lies the rub, and that's the whole basis of what we're talking about here. If you're going to be representing a seller client as well as a buyer customer, how do you stay in your lane? Well, these are the challenges, and we just want to be very honest about there, because you can, so long as your broker
Hmm.
allows it, you can do that. Maybe you can refer it out and take a refer and take a little bit of that and then have somebody else do that. But if you're going to do it yourself, please be very careful here, because the other thing that I worry about is if you're not very clear, if you don't get that, that agreement to work with a buyer as a customer signed right up front, and they don't understand what happens when you have that seller that says, "I sure hope they don't do a home inspection," and then you have a buyer who says, "Do you
Shut
think
up.
I should do a home inspection?" Now, I think it's very common sense that absolutely they should be doing a home inspection. But you have a seller that said, "Sure hope they don't do a home inspection," and you're representing them as a customer, and you're not supposed to give. I mean, as a customer, and you're not supposed to give
Any advice?
real estate advice out there. Now, what happens if they don't do that home inspection? Are you opening yourself up for liability down the line? again, I'm not an attorney. I'm not trying to threaten or, or,
And
or, or
just
question
understand
anybody.
every transaction is different. So depending on one thing that I have taught all my agents is that anything you think may go sideways between now and closing or after closing, please document it by sending an email to either the client or the customer reference to the discussion you had and their path, their choice of what they want to do. This is called CYA, cover your asset.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you do that, make sure you upload that in your file so your broker can see it that you have done your due diligence with this client or customers, that you
Now,
have given a fair, honest advice when asked.
we also have a document inside our paperless pipeline. If somebody asks for it, we'll be glad to share it
It's
with
called
you.
service recommendation. And if they can go down the list and check. If they decline, one of the things is inspection, get them sign it because that is a way to protect you from future liability. Because sometimes customer or client may have amnesia and they think,
Well, we
that's
strongly
not
recommend you have this signed by them because this basically says these are all the services that you could choose from. What would you like to do? And at the bottom, they sign for it. That is a big protection for
correct.
you from getting into the troubles that I was just kind of outlining earlier.
Well, it's there's no issue until there's money involved, right? Whether it's a repair, it's a earnest money loss, or whatever it is, and unfortunately, we get stuck in the middle of that. So if you always have your documentation with it, when you feel like this transaction may go sideways, you're always well be protected.
Now, one of the things is sometimes we will have some at times we've had buyers just request to be represented as a customer as opposed to a client. In those instances, the same rules apply,
Correct, and
right?
you make sure you put that in a special step.
So, good luck. We hope that you don't have
Yeah.
any kind of issues dealing with this at all. But if you need any kind of assistance, please give us a call. My name is Alan Richard. I'm the managing broker at Max One Realtor Partners.
My name is Ming Richardson, the compliance broker for Maximum One Realty and Realtor Partner. Thank you for watching, and we invite you back.
Have a great day.
Thank you.